Hi, and welcome to Dear Art Producer. I am your host, Heather Elder, and today is April 18th, 2023, and we are joined by Karen Blatchford, a senior art producer at VMLY&amp. During her 20-plus years in the business, she has worked as a cost consultant, an agent for photographers and illustrators, and a creative recruiter. Her experiences vary, having worked on all sorts of accounts from automotive to beauty and consumer goods to healthcare and everything in between. She loves finding creative solutions and enjoys working on all projects, whether it's print, digital, social, or video. Hello, Karen.
Hello, Heather.
I'm so happy to have you as a guest today, and it being our first guest of our new season. So welcome. Thank you for saying yes.
Well, thanks for inviting me. Happy to be here.
And it was really special to get to see you just a few weeks, well, I guess a little bit more than a few weeks ago, back in February in Chicago.
You were brave to come to Chicago in mid-winter.
I was, and I packed my big, huge sleeping bag blanket, and I remember it was pretty warm. It was raining a little bit, and we were all cracking up because it was so warm, and I was carrying around this big, huge blanket, I remember. So, well, not really blanket, but jacket that felt like a blanket.
Right, exactly. No, you're right. Our winter this year was pretty mild. I mean, you guys had a lot more snow than we did.
Well, San Francisco had so much rain and it was so cold, and I was in New York most of that time, so I was very grateful to not be there. Anyway, I'm really fascinated to hear what you have to say. So much has changed since our last season at Dear Art Producer, and I always like to kind of start off just letting our listeners get to know you a little bit, and
Sure.
Understanding that not everybody's path to their job is the same, and evident by all the different roles that you've played. I'm just curious if you can just give us a little short summary about, where you got your start and how you ended up doing what you're doing now.
Sure, absolutely. I went to college at Southern Illinois University, and I got my degree in photography. And after I graduated, I ended up kind of falling into repping, actually.
Got out of that quickly.
Oh, I did it for almost 5 years.
I'm kidding.
I started repping illustrators and did that for a year and a half. And then the folks I was working for at the time, it was a company called Monroe Campagna, and they're now called Monroe Goodman. But, or no, excuse me, I got that backwards. They were Monroe Goodman and now they're Monroe Campagna. Anyhow, with my photography background, I kind of wanted to get into repping photographers rather than illustrators. And long story short, I was with them for about 2 years, and then I started Karen Donaldson Reps, which was my maiden name. And I worked with a tabletop photographer, and I did that for a while, about 2 years. And then I kind of realized, I'm like, I think I was like 22 or 23 at the time. I'm like, I think I need more experience. So then I went and worked for a larger agent and did that for a couple years. So I really was on, that side of it. And when I started out, I was the delivery person of the portfolios back in the day. All agencies wanted to get books. So, and making coffee and doing their invoicing and billing and that sort of thing. I think no matter what you do in every job that I've had, you learn from it, no matter what it is. So then after, and now being a producer and being on the agency side for so long, I always try to follow up just because I've been in your shoes, and I know the amount of time it takes for photographers and you guys to put these estimates together. And I think the least a producer can do is follow up and let you know if you got the job or not. And it blows
Thank you for saying that.
It really blows my mind how many people, when I call them back to tell them, they say, "Thank you for calling me." And I'm like, yeah, I mean, shouldn't I do that?
Yeah.
And I hear so many times that they don't even know what happened. And I think that's really sad. I think, from a professional standpoint, agency people should have the courtesy to you guys to let you know and follow up.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. And I think it's very funny too, because a lot of times on the podcast, or even when I was doing my blog, I would ask people, what are some reasons that someone wouldn't get back to you about the job? And do you always call them? And people would say, oh my God, I always call, I always email, I always let people know. And there's
Yeah.
not one person that had any, valid reason for why they wouldn't let someone know that they didn't get the job. And I thought, wow, it's so interesting, perception versus reality, because either no one wants to admit it, or,
Yeah.
they're, I don't know, it's just their own self-awareness needs to be checked, because
Yeah.
it happens
Completely.
more often than not that we are having to follow up.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I know, and nowadays, I mean, you guys aren't just doing an estimate. There's a treatment with it
Yes.
too. And I mean,
Mhm.
that is so time consuming. So I don't know if it's because I've been on that side and I realize that I think it's important to follow up, but I think it's just, how you're raised. It's like,
Yeah.
do you have any morals? Are you a good person? Are you a human being?
Yeah. Well, thank you for that.
This
Thank you for
common
that.
courtesy.
Yeah. No, I agree. I agree. Thank you. Well, let's back up though for a second,
Yeah.
because one thing you didn't touch on was your
Yeah.
cost consulting
Oh,
experience.
yeah.
And
I didn't.
again, I think that's fascinating, just the trajectory of your career. I think VMLY&R is so fortunate to have you and any team that works with you, because you're bringing to the table your experience as a rep, as a producer, and a cost consultant. And I think that makes you a really, really valuable producer.
Well, thank you. So, just to backtrack a little bit. So after I wrapped, I was creative recruiter for a little bit, and then I produced. I was at DDB for 17 years. So, I did that a long time, and then left DDB, where actually was laid off, and then was at FCB for a while, and then that's when after FCB, I became a cost consultant. And the reason why I did that was I actually worked with a producer who went to the cost consulting side, and she and I stayed friends, and we kept in touch over the years, and she always would check in and be like, let me know when you're ready to make the switch, because I think you'd be good at this. And so it was at the time when I had two kids that were in high school, and I actually thought, it's more important to be around the house. so
Yeah.
so my kids weren't getting in trouble, so I could keep eyes on them. So this was this was before COVID hit. And so I, did the work from home thing. But what I did learn, and I think is the most interesting thing to share with you all, is that when I went to work for APR consulting, what I really learned was these brands and a lot of clients really don't understand production. And at least at APR, the bulk of the time that we would meet with our brand managers and whatever it was really educating them and teaching them the reality of what production costs, and validating the costs. Granted, I've been a producer much longer than I was a cost consultant. And I've worked with those cost consultants that are basically those people that just want to nickel and dime you. So there's there's different people at every place, right? And different personalities at every place. But a lot of the time was educating the brands of the realities of what costs are, and just normal things like, I mean, a triple bid is a good thing for checks and balances, just to verify and validate those costs.
Well,
And
the one thing I thought was really interesting, we did that wonderful podcast with you, me, and Jackie Angeletti,
oh,
and
right.
that was just fascinating. And it's one of my favorite ones. And I loved that you guys, when you were defining what a cost consultant, the role of a cost consultant, you called yourselves
Yeah.
production consultant. And that really helped me reframe it, because you explained just that a lot of these clients don't understand. And while it isn't, well, it is for some about nickeling and diming and getting down the costs and, all of that, but not
Yep.
pretending otherwise. but for you really took your role seriously to make sure that they understood production in a certain way. And I thought that was really helpful, I thought.
Yeah, and the one other thing that we did do was we would all the productions that we did for whatever the brands were, we would input it and it would catalog the costs for whatever that production was. It almost was like an archive for them. So then they could go back and see like what they spent for that year and then for the following year or past years. So it was a way for them to justify their annual spend and a lot of data. I mean, that's part of the reason why I wanted to get out of it. I'm like, oh my God, if I have to do more of this data entry stuff, I just so missed being a part of the creative process. And so that's why I didn't last more than 2 years as a production
Interesting. Well, we're
consultant.
happy to have you back.
Very, very happy to be back. All of the production consultants are they're not bad, but there are some that are just very, very difficult to deal with, and most of them have type A personalities.
I
We'll
know. I
just
feel
leave
like you
it
and I can do a whole nother podcast on cost consultants. So there's a lot to learn there.
Yeah,
Okay. So tell me about on the current projects that you work
sure.
on. What do you think the percentage tend to be photography or motion or both? Or, tell me a little bit about your
Sure.
current
Well,
workload.
you know, I think for me, it's a little bit different than your average producer. And the reason why that is because at VMLY&R, I'm kind of known as a print specialist because print isn't as popular as it was, 5, 10 plus years ago. A lot of agencies are now siloing or we used to have our, silos, right? Where
Hmm.
broadcast stills or, the term was art buyer. And now a lot of agencies want people who know how to do it all. Well, when they hired me, I told them I don't want to do it all. And I'm a print specialist. So if you're open to that, that's fine. But I am not a broadcast producer. I don't want to be a broadcast producer. So, what's different about me is because I have this kind of specialty role at BMLY&R, I get to work with all our offices all across North America. And so, because I'm that print specialist, I work I don't have certain set accounts that I only work on.
Oh, interesting.
I work with all the VML offices all over the US. So New York, San Francisco, Seattle, Dallas, Kansas City, Chicago, Atlanta. So whenever there's a print element from any of those office, they'll call myself or the couple other people that work with me that are kind of more print specialists. So because of that, I would say all of my jobs are stills, and some of them are, and I'd say maybe 60 to 70% are only stills. And
Wow. I
and
love that.
I'm only doing I'm doing GIFs or I'm doing a little bit of motion that's for social media. So I really don't do a lot of I do zero broadcast and I will do piggyback shoots with a broadcast producer, but then there's
Mhm.
two producers.
Then there's two producers.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they'll bring me as the print person who's handling the photographer on set, and then we have a separate broadcast producer that's working with the director.
Do you find that most of your projects right now are just print or are they piggyback shoots too?
I'd say most of mine are just print.
Okay. Oh, that's really rare and very
Yeah, yeah,
amazing. That's great.
you're right, and that's why I feel so fortunate to have this position because I personally don't think a producer can be really good at all of it. I mean, there's so many nuances to it. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. I know there's a lot of people that but what I've found are the broadcast producers don't wanna deal with the print. So
Yeah.
then they're spending all their time with the directors and then the photographer gets, they're like the adopted stepchild that no
Oh,
one
yeah.
wants to deal with. And instead of, you need 4 hours to get your amount of shots done, but you're stuck having to cram it in a half an hour.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, they say, well, why didn't I get all these alts? Well, because unfortunately the poor photographer only got a fourth of the time needed. That's why
Yeah. It is a
often,
challenge,
yeah.
I think as the departments have integrated,
Mhm.
it is very interesting to see. Now, granted, there are very many great broadcast producers out there that have learned and understood the print side and been able to
Yeah,
integrate seamlessly,
I
100%.
agree,
And
I
there are
agree.
really great print producers out there that have done the same thing on the other side. Totally get it. And agencies
Yeah,
support it. And this is not me, complaining, but I'm, come to it like you do with a lot of experience for a very long time. And what I recognize is that the broadcast producers really tend to, like you said, enjoy their relationships with broadcast and do tend to think of print as, and they don't prioritize it.
right,
And they prioritize the bottom line and the production, and there is no relationship.
right.
The biggest difference between a print producer and a broadcast producer is the value of the relationship.
Yeah,
People come to me, the print, and because print has always been not inferior, but the less prioritized, less money goes to it.
right,
People like you have had to have strong relationships. You've had to been, be able to go to people and ask for favors or feel like you can work with
right.
someone and make something happen. And, so we've all over the years developed these incredibly strong relationships because of that.
Yes,
And
yeah,
insert broadcast producer into the print world, and it's just not valued as much, and that's
yeah,
fine. I'm not, again, it's a different world, and we're learning and we're starting to have and build those relationships, but it's a different approach.
yeah.
So I find that very interesting.
Let me interject one other thing that I've learned, and what I always try to do when I'm on these piggyback shadow shoots, whatever you want to call it. People call them different things, but at the end of the day, it's basically two productions, you know, trying to be on the same dime and get multiple different medias done. But what I've found that has been helpful when we are doing these shadow shoots or piggyback shoots is I like to hire, or when I'm getting my bids in, I will ask my broadcast producer, who is the person from that production company? I need a liaison for my team, and I want it in my estimate that I'm going to have a go-to person that is my person who will be, whenever information from broadcast is shared, that it gets funneled to us. So
Yeah, that's
all
helpful.
parties know all the information at the same time. And then that way, if for, because oftentimes we try to share things to economize, to save money. So let's just say wardrobe, that we're going to be using the TV's wardrobe. I tell that person, and then it's that person's responsibility to make sure that their stylist knows that we're going to be using it, to make sure that it's held and not returned.
Yeah.
So, and then the other thing that I always try to do is I always want to shoot second. I never want to shoot first. I always want the TV production to go first. And I always try to get my own day. I'm like, if there's any way, let's hold the sets, hold the wardrobe. We will use the same hair and makeup, same stylist. We'll have everybody come back the second day. That is if budget allows for
Yeah,
that.
and that's great.
Often,
That just shows you're valuing the creative and the actual deliverables you want to, otherwise, I think when the production company drives the process, it is about the bottom line and the efficiency and the time. And you literally are just piggybacking and you're hoping you can get whatever you can because all they're really interested in is just kind of content for content's sake.
right, right. I mean, if budget allows it, that it just ensures that the photographer gets the time needed. If
Yeah.
if we don't have to make it happen on that same day. If we do, then I really use that liaison as the person, as I have them sit with the broadcast producer to make sure that they're penciling time, that we get our time for our shots. And
Yeah.
then that
Interesting.
way, when they create their schedule, they're both sitting down, and it's usually from that production house. And so they're friends. So it behooves them to get along and to play nice with us and to make sure
Yeah.
that we're getting our time to get stuff done. And it's helpful. It's an added expense, but I think it really helps communication flow and helps with prioritizing and making sure that the stills gets time
Yeah. Well, thank
to make
you.
their content. Sure.
Let's talk a little bit about marketing to you and finding talent.
Very
How
good.
are you finding talent for a project now?
I find talent. I'm still old school in the way that I still like the books. I still use Workbook. I still use At Edge. I also just, I've made relationships with people like yourself and other reps. And, I know reps from, East Coast, West Coast, Midwest, and I go through, your guys' websites and go through that way as well. I like to create every project is something new, and I like starting over from scratch. That's not to say I don't work with people that I've already worked with. I like to work with people more than once, but I also think I love finding new talent and working with new people. There's so many talented people out there. I think it's silly if one person keeps going back to the same person over
Yeah,
and over. Like,
there are a lot of great talented people.
yeah,
Um,
and each project is different. So I like to try to find, that's what my favorite part of the job is finding talent and searching for talent. And so,
well, how are photographers and reps connecting with you right now? Is there a more effective and useful message that kind of rises to the top, or is it
yeah.
something else that stands out to you?
Well, what I will say is due to, COVID and people, a lot of agencies are wanting people to come back, but a lot of people don't want to come back. We've figured out a way to work really efficiently from home, and we can get a lot more work done rather than having to commute and in. And so because there's still a lot of people not in the office, I would say do not send mailers. It's not worth your money. The mailers that you sent, for example, like most of us don't have offices. So we have a desk that we come to and, we can't leave anything. So there's no space for all this stuff. So when I get a piece of mail, I get an email from my mailroom and they say, next time you're in the office, swing by and pick it up. So I would say the most efficient way to do it is email, the email blasts and following up with people you've worked with and trying to do Zoom calls or whatever, connect that way.
Are there any common mistakes or pitfalls that photographers tend to make when they're trying to get your attention?
Yeah, I guess there's like the fine line of how many times you email. I mean, I would say, uh, it's hard to say, but I would say once a month. I probably wouldn't do more than once a month. If you send out an email blast, you can follow up and with an email saying, I sent an email blast last week and would love to set up a time just to connect with you and show you some new work. And then if they don't respond, I would wait to your next email blast and then,
Yeah.
there's like a stalkingness that can be that
Yeah. That's a
some
little creepy.
some creatives like, if it's more than once a week or whatever, oftentimes, and to be honest, they're not intentionally being rude. I mean, maybe some of them are, but it's just that they're busy and
Oh, goodness, and the amount of emails, I always say, email is interruption marketing.
yeah.
I am coming to you at a time that you have not asked for anything. So now if I'm gonna follow up and ask for something,
Mhm.
like, that's not necessarily gonna be received well all the time, right? Because again, I'm interrupting you. So I think, you know, being a rep, it's a little different than an individual photographer where you have multiple photographers that you're promoting.
Yeah.
So I think you have to work towards trying to have your messages be consistent and non-aggressive. Like, don't ask for anything. You're just sharing. So if you happen to click on it, great. If you read it and you like it and you click through, even better. And if you delete it, fine, because there'll be another one coming at some point.
Right.
But I do think that it's really important to remember that you're interrupting people.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, I like it because I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot about that person.
Mhm.
Or,
Yeah.
but it is inundating. And, I probably get anywhere from 10 to 30 a day.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. I mean, how else are you guys supposed to do your jobs? I get it.
Tell me about what kind of work you and your creatives are gravitating towards right now.
So, everybody's trying to be authentic and real. And
Mhm.
so there's a lot of that. I'm working on a healthcare account that has different brands, and so we've been doing a fair amount of uh the whatever that brand ambassador is. So it's
Mhm.
these people who take this drug, and so we're actually photographing real people who use whatever this drug is. So we go to them. So it's usually lifestyle stuff. I mean, all that pharma healthcare stuff is pretty similar, right? It's always, okay, it's people and lifestyle. Let's show from the
Right.
brand's
I take
point
the
of
drug and
view.
look what I can do.
Yeah. So there's a fair amount of that. And I mean, if you watch TV and you're looking at commercials, like 3 out of 4 commercials are all healthcare.
Mhm.
It's like, it's because those pharma company have money. You know?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of pharma out there. On the one good thing is they tend to have budgets. I'd say a lot of lifestyle.
And what's your process like for sharing options with your team? So, you get a scope, you gather
Mhm.
a bunch of links. Is that what you do? And then you share those? Like what
Yep.
what what does that look like?
So how it works, generally, after the concept has been sold, we'll have a meeting with the team, and then they'll give me their deck and kind of walk me through how many assets and deliverables they wanna get, and then I generally send links to just my creative team, and I usually send 15 to 20 links, and of those links, I say, "Let me know who your top 3 are," and then I'll check availabilities for the top 3. There are some creative teams that they'll say, "I want more." So sometimes sometimes I will literally be sending up to 50 links, depends how finicky in particular the creative teams are. But yeah, so it's crazy the
Do you think
amount.
they like just the link, or do they prefer a little description or like a little screen grab to give you a taste of it, or is everyone kind of different?
So what I try to do, like if it's, say, for example, back to pharma, if it's testimonial stuff, I'll go to the website and I'll find, like, I'm specifically looking, like, I love when photographers have their websites categorized in buckets.
Mhm.
Generally, I know there's an overview section that shows everything, but if I'm looking for pharma and they have pharma on their website, I'll go specifically and send that link that has that body of work. So the creatives are immediately seeing relevant material that is going to be for their project. If they, of the 20 links, and they pick their top 3, sometimes of those top 3, then that's when I'll call their agent or go to them directly and say, this is a pharma project. I'm looking for images of parents and kids interacting in a kitchen. Do you by chance have any other material that maybe isn't on your website that is, and can you make a PDF for me to share with my creative team? But I usually don't do that until it's selected the 3 people that I'm going to be
Yeah.
bidding.
Interesting.
Otherwise, it's just way too much work.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't have
Yeah. No, I know. I'm on the other end of those emails sometimes.
Yes, I
But,
know
when
you
we
are.
redesigned our website, I redesigned it with that in mind so that you can
Yeah.
filter by categories. I can send links for just the category portfolios and, all of that, and kind of doing deep dives into different projects of theirs. So there's some backstory in case it's needed and things like that. And I
Mhm.
found that having a website designed specifically for what that has been really
Yeah.
helpful for us.
Well, it's very helpful for us too. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you for noticing. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the creative call.
Sure.
Such an important part, especially, I remember right before COVID hit, before any of us even knew what COVID was. I remember having a meeting with an art producer who was telling me about this thing called Zoom and how he's starting to do Zoom creative calls. And I looked into it and I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. And I remember reaching out to some of my photographers and they were like, oh, that's a really cool idea. And others were like, yeah, no, not doing that. And then, of course, the COVID happened and our world is only Zoom practically.
Right.
But I think it has become so important to be present on a
Yeah.
Zoom call. And now it's also very hard, right? Like we're not all sitting at our desks. So these photographers are in airports, in cabs, on set, all of
Mhm.
that. So it's not always possible for them to, have a curated place and a moment in time that's,
Yeah.
dedicated just for something. And I think people do understand that.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely.
so, not having your camera on all the time
Yeah. Yep.
is understandable. But
Mhm.
I do want to know if there's anything that consistently stands out as a reason that a creative may choose a photographer or director to bid after a creative call. Like, what are they looking for on that call?
Well, back in the day, I would say the creative call was the most important thing because back in the day, photographers weren't doing treatments. But
Right.
I will now say that I actually think the treatment is more important than the creative call. I would say.
Interesting.
And the reason why I say that is because I've been on, back again, the creative call used to be the end all be all where we would triple bid and you would think you would have, I would know the order of who the reco is, but oftentimes after those creative calls, it changes. And now I would say it's now more after they see the treatment is more important. They're both
Interesting.
very important, but I would say make time to make a good treatment because those treatments are being used. The creatives are reading them, and oftentimes the treatments are being sent to our clients.
That was
Um,
my next question.
yeah,
Not everybody sends the treatments to the clients. And for us, that's where things can fall apart in the process. We can control our participation every step of the way from what we send you in links to our creative call to our estimate, but we are never forward facing with the client. So
right.
if you don't share our treatment with your client, they don't know us. So I'm really, really happy to hear that you actually share your treatment with the client. A lot of places don't.
Yeah, I would say 90% of the time the treatment is shown. And it's a big deciding factor. The creatives really oftentimes won't make up their mind until after they've seen the treatment. And I've my last production, they told me they want to work with this one photographer, and they were saying that all along. And then the treatment came, and they were just blown away by a different photographer. And in even the creative call, they originally thought, and then after they got the treatment, they're like, nope, we've totally changed our mind, and now we want to go with this other person. And the reason why was it was very detailed. It was obvious to the team that this photographer spent a ton of time on the treatment. I know photographers, if they're listening to this, they're maybe cringing because I mean, no one likes to do the treatments because I
Yeah.
know they're super, super time intensive. But if you can kind of try to come up, you know, if you have one and it's really detailed, and then you can just go back and make tweaks to that one,
Mhm.
try to make it appropriate for different projects, I think it's worth your investment to make one really, really good one and then try to alter it.
I've always wondered, given how much time, I mean, it is, there are days, and it's not just like I said,
Yeah.
everybody's sitting at their desk waiting to do this. Like these guys and women
Right.
are on shoots and with their families, and they're doing it at night after the kids go
Right.
to bed and weekends. So that's, I'm often on the end of hearing about how challenging it is to get it
Mhm.
done.
Right.
And I always wondered if an RFP like situation
Mhm.
would be a good idea, meaning you, the agency, come up with 5 questions that you ask the same, or however many questions you ask everybody in the group to answer
Mhm.
those questions,
Yeah.
and then, provide whatever images are needed, as opposed to spending all this time them trying to formulate the approach. And I mean, it is their approach, so they have to formulate that, but they've become so designed heavy and so perfectly beautiful presentations. I just wondered if there's a way we can kind of democratize it a little bit so they're spending less time on it. But I don't know. I don't know. I don't know the answer.
Yeah, I don't know the answer either. I'm wondering, if they spend the time once and make one that's really, I would think most photographers have their preferred crew, right?
Yeah, I
So
mean, there's definitely templates for sure.
yeah, if they
Like,
can keep a template and just try to, you know, customize certain parts of it, for example, like the treatment that I had most recently that changed their mind was this photographer went and actually dropped in the stylists, websites and all of that. So then we could go through and look at the crew and who they were wanting to work with. And it was very detailed.
yeah.
And it just gave my creative team and it gave our client the confidence that this photographer really spent a ton of time, thinking about it and, you know, just thinking everything through. And that just
Well,
really,
it's not just the photographer who's showing up, right? The crew is
right,
critical. Those
right.
stylists and the production designers and the set designers and
Yes,
the hair and makeup people and the assistants and the digital tech, like they all have their own brands and personalities. And
right.
if you have a creative team that wants to dive deep into that at the treatment stage, I think that would be really that's helpful information to include.
Hmm. Totally, totally.
So is there anything in that like review process, the creative call, the treatments, all of that before we start talking about estimates that you would like people to understand that they may not understand on our side about that part of the process?
Well, hmm, I would just say it's really critical that if the agency shares a deck, I've been on creative calls where the photographer says, "Yeah, I've glanced at it," and they haven't taken the time to read through it. So my advice is, I know you guys are really busy, but don't schedule a call unless you've at least thoroughly read that deck because that's I think a big turnoff for the creatives if they've made this deck to talk about the project and the photographer hasn't even had time to
Yeah,
read.
no, that's important. You guys are really good tour guides on that call, and it's important for us to have read it. I would add to people listening, if you are other art producers are listening, please get us that deck in time to review.
Oh
there are
yeah.
there are many times we're getting it, an hour before we're about to get on a call.
Well, that's just
Um,
not fair to you guys then.
yeah,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
makes it
That's
a little bit
totally
harder, but expectations are in line at that point. People understand that we would have just received it. So, but I'm with
fine.
you. It's very important.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about budgets and estimate and usage.
Sure.
Are you given budgets from your clients, and what do you do if you haven't been given one?
So oftentimes, I'm given a budget, but the budget I'm given is the all-in budget, which is supposed to include agency hours and agency travel and all this other stuff. So then I'll fight with my account team or client engagement or whatever you want to call them and then be like, okay, so what of that do I get? And oftentimes I won't get an answer. So then I just, I've been doing this so long, I kind of know where things should be. And I just do my own bidding and my own estimating. But I generally don't divulge the budget to the photographers unless I know it's a super tight budget and timing is fast and I don't want to waste your guys' time. If I know it's going to be tight, then I'll tell you I only have X and I need this by so and you let me know if you can work backwards or not. And
Mhm.
if you can't, I'm not offended, and I understand that not everybody can meet every budget that we have. And sometimes you guys have to say no, and that's okay too. But so I generally don't give budgets unless I think it's going to be challenging for you guys to hit. And then I will tell you. And then I try to get all the bids to come in at the same, because at the end of the day, I don't want it to be about money. I want it to be about the creative. And I want my creative team to be able, if everybody comes in about the same, then it's about the work.
Yeah. I when I think about working on a job with you,
Mhm.
and if I don't have a budget from you, I am perfectly fine with that because I know you, I know your agency, I know your clients, and I know that I can put together a budget and share it with you and you'll tell me I've hit the mark or I haven't and you'll give me an
Yeah,
opportunity to revise our approach. Where
absolutely.
I find it really challenging is when I either have a new client,
Yeah,
um, or yeah, it's mostly when I have a new client, especially kind of startup clients or startup
sure.
agencies or smaller agencies who who when you ask if they have a budget and they say no, but we should have enough money, or I think it's a decent budget, or everybody defines it a little bit differently. And then
True.
we spend hours on creative calls and treatments and working on bids and figuring it out. And we'll send them a bid for $200,000 or whatever it is.
Mhm.
And oh my God, we only have 50. Or oh my gosh, we only have 40. And you're just like, wow, okay, you knew what you had, you
Mhm.
thought that was enough. You
Right.
don't, it's like what you said in the beginning about production consultants, how many people don't understand production. And
Mhm.
that is what we try and get at when we ask for the budget.
Yeah.
Um, and I sometimes it's very difficult because without saying, hey, I don't know you. I have
Right.
literally no idea how you work and what your understanding of production is. And I don't want to spend 5 hours on your project and have you tell me you only have $20,000.
Correct.
Um, you try and dance around that as directly as possible. And you want to help people. You want to be client service oriented, but it's very challenging. And more, there are less people like you who understand production out there and
Mhm.
more people who don't. And
Right.
it's very hard out there.
I call you back and say, "Okay, I got all my bids in, and we really wanna work with you, but you are higher. Is there any
Yeah.
way, and this area is high, and, so I'll work with you and partner with you to try to make that work." But I feel you and hear you that there are people that don't share that, and like you said, you're blindfolded, you don't know where to start, and
Right?
it's hard, and you spend a lot of time, and you wanna help them out and do a good job, but yeah, they have to be realistic of the amount of deliverables that they wanna get is realistic with the budget that they have. That's and it's happened to me before where I've given them a budget that I thought was fair, and then it's come back to me and my account people were like, "Well, we have half that." And I was like, "What?" And I get angry, and I'm like,
Yeah.
"Well, when the hell did you find out you had that budget?"
Yeah.
Like, had you told me that 3 days ago, I could have saved a lot of time, and so I hear you and I feel you. I'm sorry that happens so often, but yeah, it's a big problem with what we do.
It's a bit of a and I'm sure the people who don't know the budgets either are afraid to ask the client or they don't have the answers from their client. I feel
Mhm.
people like it's not people that people are trying to trick you into
Yeah,
not telling you the budget
yeah,
because they think they're going to get it for a better deal. Like everybody knows no one has nearly enough money to get a job done nowadays. I think
right.
it's just kind of an education process and understanding what production requires.
Right. And then the other
Um,
thing is clients expect to own everything forever in
yes,
perpetuity.
yes, yes.
That's
Does usage
that's
come up a
become
lot?
norm.
And do your account people understand usage when they're talking to their clients about scoping a job?
They 50/50. Again, it's an education. I think it's our job to educate them. But I will say it seems like it's become more expected that we own that it's the library of images and it's not just 4 or 5 selects. And then I say, okay, but you have to pay for that then.
Yeah,
That's, I either tell them up front, include that in the fee. Or if I also, on the flip side, if I know they're only gonna use a couple images, I'll tell my team, "That's silly. We don't need to ask for all that. We know we're
yeah.
only gonna use 3 images, so let's only say 3 selects," or
Mhm.
whatever it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah, no, that's smart. So do you think it's harder or easier to get an estimate approved right now? And what is your prediction for the rest of 2023?
Well, I would say I think it's harder, and I think it's just because, look what's happening on the news, right? It's like
Mhm.
inflation, it's the economy, it's everything costs more. It's I think what I experienced from last winter to now, seeing like all these tech companies having all these layoffs, like
Yeah.
Twitter and Facebook, and I mean, just Microsoft, Intel, like all these big clients are cutting back. So I've seen clients who in the past who've had big budgets and kept us busy are all worried and concerned and asking that question, do we really need to have this production now or can it wait? So I unfortunately my answer to you is I think less work. I think people are I've seen clients afraid to spend money. And so I'm a little concerned and worried that I think it's gonna be a slower summer and hopefully things pick up. I don't know. It's a little
Yeah,
scary
no,
time,
I'm with you.
honestly.
I'm seeing the same thing on this end. Things are, they go through spurts. It gets
Right.
really busy and then it gets a little slow and but the reasons that things are going away are I prefer them to go to another photographer if we're going to lose a job than to
Yeah.
hear that they've pushed pause, you know,
Right.
because
Right.
at least then they're spending money.
Right. Right.
Okay, so we're almost kind of winding down here, but there are a couple more questions I wanted to try and get some answers from or some insight from you from.
Sure.
Do you when it comes time to choose a photographer or
Mhm.
director, do you find that the clients are choosing based on their own criteria or are they deferring to you agency partners? Meaning,
Yep.
you know, do the creatives have a first choice and they tend to listen to the creatives or are the clients raising their hand more forcefully now saying what they want?
Right. I would say 90% of the time of all the projects that I've worked on at VMLY&R, we have an agency recommendation. Now, that's not to say that they always go with our recommendation,
Sure.
but we always have a recommendation. And I'd say 70 to 80% of the time they go with our agency recommendation. The times that they may not are when budget is tight and if there is a person that is lower budget, sometimes they'll say like, "You know what? I know you really like this person, but we just don't have that additional money. We'd rather go with this other photographer that's more affordable."
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
And how about are there any common mistakes or pitfalls that photographers tend to make when trying to land a job?
No, not really. I mean, I would say to your point earlier, like always ask if there's a budget. I think that's a fair and a question that should be asked. And then if a producer if they do give you a budget, stay at that budget. Nothing annoys me more when I give a budget and then someone comes in higher than the budget. And then I'm like, okay, then it sounds like you're not listening to me, and then even that gets So don't, that's a big no. Like if you're
Yeah,
given a
we
budget,
tend
don't
to,
promote
if we
unless
can't meet a
you,
budget,
yeah,
we'll give a second estimate that shows you what we can do for your budget.
that,
So,
yes, that is
because,
good.
maybe I can do it, but just not give you all the scenarios,
Right, right. And
Um,
that's fair. And that's fair. What else? I'd say that's if you say, if I tell you when I need it, if I need it Monday morning, I need it Monday morning. Like don't give it to me end of day Monday or miss the deadline. That's if you
yeah,
say
that
you're
never
going to do
feels good.
something, make sure you do it on that time because
Yeah,
usually I've communicated internally to my team when I'm going to get it, and if I don't get it, then it makes me look bad, and then I don't like to look bad
yeah.
to teams.
No, that's an important, follow through is important. I always say to my photographers, look, if you can't get it to them on that date, I need to know now. I don't need to know on that date.
Right.
Right. So
Exactly.
let's tell them when we can get it to them and then they can decide if they want to include us or not. But we can't say we're going to get it to you Monday and then on Monday say, sorry, I can't do it.
Right.
They know what's on their plate between now and that day. So
Mhm.
okay, so then just the last question before we wrap up. I have a couple quick little personal questions, but how do you see, and maybe you don't right now, but do you see and how is AI affecting commercial artists or specifically photographers,
So,
given that you're
I'm
doing
not seeing it yet myself. The agency is definitely talking about it. They're doing internal things to try to just have us be educated and knowledgeable about it, but I personally haven't seen it yet internally or haven't worked on any projects. I did read, I think it was a week or 2 ago, that Levi's is doing their
Yeah.
first campaign with AI talent, and I was just like, "Wow, that's just so crazy to me."
Yeah, and there was some backlash to that too. That was it for anybody listening who hasn't read up on it. You should go check it out. Go look for it and read all the different opinions about that. It's
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah. I'm gonna need to
Okay,
read.
well, I'm happy to hear that it's not completely taking over your agency just yet. That's a
Yep.
positive. Okay, and then I always end on the same two last questions. What's your favorite thing to do on a Sunday? And if you weren't a producer, what would you be?
Oh, on a Sunday, I love to play tennis.
Oh, no pickleball for you?
I play pickleball too, but I prefer tennis.
Okay.
But I will play both. And then gosh, what if I weren't I I don't know. Probably something in this field because this is, I mean,
I
I
know
don't
it's hard to
know.
be in a creative field and then think of something other than being in a creative
I mean,
environment again.
right. I thought about, being a location scout or castings. I'd have to do something in the in this field because I love it.
Well, you're good at it, and we would be bummed to not have you in this field because you are
Oh,
just a legend. And knowing you for as long as I have, and learning from you as much as I have, and
we
enjoying
all
your
learn
friendship for as long
from
as I
each
have,
other.
it's been really quite a special
Absolutely.
ride, Karen.
Absolutely. I feel the same way. It's I love that you're doing this. Thank you for doing this. I've listened to your other podcasts and we all can always learn from each other. So, thank you for doing it.
Absolutely, and you too. Have a wonderful week, the rest of your week in Chicago. I hope spring is springing there, and I hope I
Thank
get to
you.
see you soon.
Sounds great. Me too.